boards. And then following the completion of the clinic, the sponsoring organization is required by this statute to maintain all of these records for a period of 5 years. So that's it in a nutshell.
Committee members, questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Oh, Representative Kitt.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. One quick question. In here it says that the sponsoring organizations and so forth have to notify the department. Which department? I don't see the department defined.
I understand that that's defined elsewhere in the article.
Okay.
Okay. A good question. I already checked it out for you. Betsy's.
I was trying to get over there, but couldn't get to you quick enough. But thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Okay. Further questions? Representative Reinders.
Thank you, Madam Chair, so much, and thank you, Representative, for bringing the bill. Only because I'm just getting at the page 3, whose license or certificate is suspended or revoked pursuant to disciplinary proceedings in any jurisdiction. Just walk me through that real quick. Does that mean if you've got something pending in another state, you're not eligible? Does that mean you must report it? Just walk me through that.
No, what that basically means, if your license is not in good standing in your home jurisdiction, if you have any kind of disciplinary suspension or problem, you are not eligible to come to Georgia under this provision.
And I apologize. Thank you so much for that explanation, but I apologize for not knowing the protocol. Is there a situation where you don't have your license suspended or revoked, but you're pending a hearing, for lack of a better way of putting it?
I think we have an expert here on that. Dr. McNabb, what does the Board of Medicine or the boards, especially the Board of Medicine, do? If some, right, come to the mic. So the question is, if you like had a physician who y'all were in, who the Board of Medicine was investigating.
In another jurisdiction?
In another, well, no,
or
yeah, well, he would only talk for Georgia. But like if a Georgia physician was under investigation, but the board had not made a decision yet, would there be?
Sure, that would be a very common occurrence actually, because the disciplinary process in Georgia and, you know, in most states as well is a prolonged sort of investigation, and it takes months to years to complete an action. So somebody could theoretically have a significant problem in any of a number of states, and they would be able to come to Georgia because we wouldn't know anything yet.
So there almost has to be I guess, a finding of determination before.
You'd have to have a determination.
Yeah,
of
because I'm not innocent until proven guilty. Sure.
If you change and ask the question, are you subject to any, you know, investigations in any other jurisdiction that would address the question of somebody were you know, forthcoming?
Yeah, and the only reason why, Madam Chair, if I may,
Sure.
is my train of thought is, let's suppose for the moment that you were a blank provider in another jurisdiction, another state, and you're being investigated on 16 counts of Medicaid fraud or patient abuse or whatever the case may be. Is there anything in here to the author of the bill that would give us the latitude or at least the flexibility to say, well, you know what, we may want to hold off before we voluntarily let you into our jurisdiction or into the great state of Georgia?
There's a degree to which it's really very difficult to control issues like that. But the language of the bill does require a couple of things, I believe, that address that. Number one, the sponsoring organization verifies the status themselves prior to scheduling the person to come in as a volunteer. And they have the person sign affidavits attesting as to the status of their licensure. And then this information is submitted to the state so that it's verified again by the state immediately prior to the time in which they provide the free services.
Yeah, and two quick follow-ups. So is there anything that would prevent them from being able to grant it if there hadn't been any fact-finding at that point?
I'm not sure that I'm following the question. If you're saying if there's an issue out there that has not bubbled far enough yet that
yes, but it gives me great concern. I might not want them to automatically being able to come into my state and volunteer because it is large enough that it might send up a flag. Is there anything that would give me at least the flexibility to say, no, I don't want that particular physician?
That's part of the purpose of having it sent into the state prior to the dates of the clinic. but also the affidavit that the sponsoring organization would have them sign should address that.
Okay, and then secondly would be, let's suppose for the moment that ongoing investigation in another jurisdiction, we allowed the volunteer the person to come in and do their services in this state, and then after the fact, it was found that they were not in good standing in the other state, then it would automatically revoked in this state.
They
Well,
wouldn't have a license.
yeah, under this statute, they don't have any sort of a standing basis to practice. They can
Okay.
simply come in and provide volunteer services for the dates, and the dates and location must be provided in advance, and that's all they would be allowed to do in Georgia.
Thank you.
Representative Henson.
I apologize for coming in late. Just in terms of a complaint being filed against a physician, dentist, or whatnot, a lot of them can be frivolous. A lot of them can take 2 or 3 years to actually surface and go through the process and then be found frivolous. So, I mean, yes, some of them are very, very severe, and I think they're dealt with relatively quickly, but others are, they're not dealt with quickly, always?
Think that that Dr. McNabb would say to me that because of the legal situation that the board, at least the medical board, has to cross all the T's and dot all the I's when they're doing an investigation, because if they don't, the lawyers get them off. Is that not correct, Dr. McNabb?
Well, it just takes time for the process, and
And-
even if there's not any other issues, just to get peer reviews and to move forward.
Okay, thank you. And for the committee, Dr. Mack used to be the medical director for the Composite Board of Medical Practice. Okay. Representative Randall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, if there is, like, there's some type of complaint or something that's being just beginning on a physician, there's no indication, there's no database where it says that there's anything pending at all. So nothing shows up in any database until action has been taken.
Dr. McNabb?
correct.
That's right.
The physician might, or whoever, might not even know they had a complaint for that matter, but there would be a complaint filed. They might never know, but if they did find out that there was a complaint that was being investigated, there would be a significant period of time between the time that they found out and there was a final adjudication.
Thank you.
Other questions for the author? No questions? Okay. What is the position of the committee?
Madam Chair, make a motion to pass.
Oh, well, okay. So, Representative Watkins, did you have a question? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing no further discussion. Everyone in favor of the passage of the substitute to Senate Bill 506, say aye. Anyone opposed, say no. It sounds like the ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. While we're waiting, we have you have a substitute to Senate Bill 470. Okay. Representative Kidd? Sure, if you want to.
Thank you. I've been asked by Senator Goggins, if so forth, that I would present this. The substitute that you have before you really only relates to Baldwin County. It's the only county that has a military junior college. And the essence behind it, if you might remember on another bill earlier last week, the pain bill that we had, I made reference to the self-referral law. And so we need an amendment like this to redefine rural so those physicians and the hospital in Milledgeville can jointly open up an MRI facility to better treat the patients in Baldwin County.
Okay, question for the presenter. Pardon? It's Senate Bill 470. Sorry, it's one page. Did you get one? Right there it is. Okay. Okay. What happened, and the reason I pulled this bill from the calendar on Monday, the days are running out, is because they were trying to redefine what a rural county was. That would have meant rural counties have a special provision where if they need to partner with physicians, they can get around sort of the self-referral rules in case they need services. This bill, the way it was, would have opened up for any group of physicians that wanted to buy, or a group of people that wanted to buy an MRI machine, to open up. And the problem we have is that's one in the imaging area. It is one of our high-cost areas, one that they have very carefully looked at and have tried to make sure that we do not have a plethora of imaging centers to keep down medical cost. And so there is an area in this need in this area, and that is why the bill was tightened up to be like this. Questions? Representative Chanel.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is a new and improved version of this bill, in my opinion, and at the appropriate time, I'd like to be recognized for a motion.
Okay. All right. Do we have any other questions from the committee? Okay. No further questions. Representative Chanel.
Madam Chairman, I move substitute to Senate Bill 470.
Do I hear a second?
Do pass.
Okay. Sorry, Nikki. Didn't mean to cut you off. We have a motion and a second for a do pass. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing no further discussion. Everybody in favor of the substitute to Senate Bill 470, say aye. Anyone opposed, say no. The ayes have it. So the passage of. Okay. Okay. Well, do we have anybody that's here on Senate Bill 380? Where's Ethan? Have you been involved in this one? Okay, I think Senator Carter is tied up in a committee meeting. What? We don't have any money carrying the bill. I'll do it and get with a little help. Are you with? Okay. Still what? He's still in the committee? Okay. How, does it look like it's going to be a lot longer? It's Senate Bill 380. Pardon? It does what? Yeah. Do you know what the bill is? That they're before the other committee. It's what? No, I'm asking. No, I'm asking if you know what bill at the Senate is now. Okay. It's the pain management. Prescription pad bill. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and present it for Senator Carter. I think I can do this. Okay, if the committee will look at the first couple of pages, or the first through line 29, that is the bill that we passed out for Senator Weldon. It is not quite as complete, and there is an amendment to make it match Senator Weldon's that we passed out, and I'll take in a minute. And that amendment is AM 33-1217. So that would make the first part of this bill match what Representative Weldon passed out. The rest of the part of the bill is a carefully worked out between the various groups on mail order. Correct, not mail order? Yeah. Okay, on mail order and how that is going to be handled with out-of-state mail order individuals. And basically that's it. It's been carefully crafted between the various groups. Ethan, would you like to? Right. No.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Ethan James of the Georgia Hospital Association. I'm not sure what version we're working off of. I don't have a copy of that bill. I think you're exactly correct that many of the parties interested in this were working on the mail order provisions of it. However, I could only speak to Section 1 of the bill, which talks about the secure prescription paper. To that, the Hospital Association does support that, and I'd be happy to answer any questions as related to that section.
About the security patient, the security paper. Representative Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Is the amendment, does that apply to Section 1 or what? So we're talking about,
Are you putting, yes.
that
and
does
it
the
also-
security paper?
Right, right.
Okay, and that just brings it into line. Are you,
With what we,
and the
Yes.
Hospital Association is good with the
Right.
security paper and the amendment?
For
Correct.
Section 1,
Yes.
if we're working off of Amendment 331217,
Yes.
yes, lines 1 through 16. Yeah, we support that amendment.
And 17 through 23 there.
Yes, sir. That's fine as well.
Okay, it just sort of, I guess it just changes it throughout the bill. Okay.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the entire amendment speaks to that Section 1. So, yes, we would support all those amendments.
Representative Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question about on the amendment line 22 to 23, 21 to 23, subsection B, which refers back to 38.5, that has secure paper that meets the requirements of CMS, and then subparagraph A has an additional kind of requirement for security. Is there a need for an additional security other than what CMS requires? Why is it different?
Representative Pack, if I'm reading that correctly, I think it's just breaking out a new subsection A where the code section used to exist. Security paper means just breaking out those and then adding the B. That's the new section, or the new language about the CMS requirements.
Is why have the state board approval on there if we're going to accept what CMS approves, which doesn't require the seal? Is there an additional security feature that's necessary? Okay.
Two routes they can go, either meeting a certain criteria, and if the board of pharmacy has specifically approved the seal of the CMS,
I got it. Okay, I understand.
Representative Kidd.
I've got a question not about Section 1, but another section at the appropriate time, but for the appropriate person to answer the question.
Is there any other questions in regards to Section 1 for our friend, Mr. James? Mr. James, let me just ask, it's really not, I don't know who to ask this to, so I may be in your same position, but any other questions about Section 1? Thank you. All right, the presenter of the bill, questions for the presenter on the bill on the other sections, I turn to Representative Kidd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, can Georgia literally pass legislation to control what somebody ships into Georgia from their plant in Chattanooga or New York or Chicago? And I explain this by both in the pill prescription business, so to speak, And also the language in here that says medical devices. Every day you see stuff on television, call us and we'll ship you this Viagra or this whatever, whatever. And you call that number and they've got some doctor on staff in New York that'll write a prescription right there and then they'll ship it down to you. Likewise, every day you see advertisements from the scooter store, Hover Around and XYZ as far as a medical device. And the same thing happens. If you're on Medicaid, you call up there and they got some doctor on the staff up there that says if you're on Medicare, you're entitled to a wheelchair, and so they'll ship you a wheelchair. Yes, I would love us to control those people, but my question is, can we?
We have somebody from the pharmacy group here, and would you like to come forward and explain this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, other states do regulate. I believe there's almost all of them do. Actually, the language that is in there that was agreed upon, the second section comes from, I think it's Florida's laws. South Carolina, Alabama, others have very similar language to it.
So, if I may follow up.
You may.
So what you're saying is, if you're talking about a medical device, it could be, we could tell Hover Around a scooter store that they can't ship something in here without approval by the board.
Yes, sir.
Or all these other advertisements we see on TV, that they can't ship something in here unless it's basically signed by a Georgia physician or meets the licensure requirements of a Georgia pharmacy.
Yes, sir.
I'm all in favor of it, but I still don't think we can do it.
All right. Thank you. Dr. Watson.
Just in follow-up on that, I'm not aware, and as a matter of fact, CMS and the FDA have been cracking down on that. It does require a prescription, and it requires they just even tightened it even further of what you have to do for a scooter and so forth.
I know I wrote Congress a letter a couple years ago about trying to do something, and I wrote the Department of Medicaid and even introduced a bill a couple years ago to try to say, let's get a handle on this, because it's, they're shipping all kind of stuff into the state.
Right, and it has been abused in the past, and I'm sure it will still be in the future. But they have made it much tougher, the regulations and the forms that you have to fill out and the evaluations that have to be done.
Fine with me. I don't think we can do that.
Representative Harden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if I might add, I believe, Representative Kidd, that those outlets, I think that you hear advertised, say, prescription written by a U.S. licensed physician. There are no such thing as a U.S. licensed physician. They're licensed by the states. And what this law would cover would be the prescriptions written by our physicians to ensure that they are filled in compliance with what our physicians want.
Thank you. Any other questions for the person presenting the bill? I have a couple small ones. Madam Chair, if I may, on Section 3, the Georgia Drugs Narcotics Agency authorized to accept donations, contributions, forfeited property, blah, blah, blah. That just caught my attention because I think we saw that language previously in regards to the pain clinics. And I know that at this time of year, it's not unusual for us to see bills like we saw in the last, I think it was House Bill 501 become Senate Bill 506. Is there any particular reason or what's the thought process of why we would need to be able to do potential forfeiture of property?
I think it's the same in the, I think this relates, isn't it for the funding of the prescription monitoring program? And
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, for the clarification of my poorly worded question, on behalf of the rest of the members, I reference you to Section 3 on page 4, lines 18, 19, and 20. I had some members asking me about what was I referencing, so I'm just trying to get a handle on why that's needed. Betsy, does
I mean, I don't know, what the intent of it is. I mean, obviously, an agency can't do that without some sort of statutory authorization. So, but I don't know what the impetus for putting that in there in the first place was.
Representative Harden?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This may have to do with, and I during my career, been involved in a couple of cases where people were trying to pass forged prescriptions. And when we found out that, and I contacted the authorities, they confiscated trucks and guns and a lot of stuff. That goes to the sheriff that confiscates it. But I'm thinking when Georgia Drugs and Narcotics has an incident where they do confiscate property that's used illegally like that, that would allow them to keep this, I believe.
That's what I was trying to say.
Okay.
Yes, that's what it is. If I can get a chance. Thank you, Representative Harden.
And thank you, Madam Chair. And the only other question I have, again, because it's a compilation, and I'm trying to, I haven't read it all, but is there anything in here, because it had come up to us before in regards to a pharmaceutical bill, and Representative Harden was asking about it, and I didn't see it anywhere, but just from my own thinking, is there anything in there in regards to auditing the mailing of prescriptions from the outside? We were looking at an auditing scale earlier, Representative Harden.
No.
Is there anything in this bill that changes any of that?
To my knowledge, no. That's so.
So it's not the intent of, as far as we know, to change anything in regards to matching the audits.
No.
Thank you. Any other questions for the presenter of the bill? Chairman Chanel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to go back to your question on page 4, 18, 19, and 20. The drugs and narcotics agencies authorized to accept donations and contribution. I don't know who to ask this question of, but who would make a donation to the Georgia Drugs and Narcotics Agency? And if it did, why would they do it?
Sorry, Representative, my brain was just jogged. Florida accepted contributions from a couple prescription drug manufacturers last year to help fund their drug monitoring.
That's what I was trying to say. Their drug monitoring program. Sorry.
But the Drug and Narcotics Agency accepted that? That's what you're saying?
Yes, sir, because they're the agency that is
Yeah.
tasked with the keep of that database.
So what happens in terms of
So it won't cost the taxpayers money.
I know, but who keeps up with what they do with that money?
Their Department of.
I assume the auditor and appropriations committees and
Makes no sense to me.
Representative, I can call me without my glasses, Representative Pack.
Quick question about that, the drug monitoring program. Since the agency here has power to enforce the drug laws, it seems to me a dangerous precedent to have people they're regulating accept donations from people they're regulating. Would the author would have a heartburn if we amend, or if somebody moved to amend that section?
Representative Pack, I think your suggestion is something that's being considered very strongly at this exact moment, if not seconds before you ask that question. Representative
Withdraw my
Henson.
question, Mr. Chairman.
A little aside, but who's carrying this bill in the House?
Looks like it might be me right now since I'm trying to present it, but anyway.
Any other questions, Representative Henson?
Like I say, I'll be better prepared with it.
No, I just, I know you're all having a great deal of problems with the funds going, but, you know, to me it's sort of like the Sheriff's Department gets funds from confiscated items that they're able to take. They either convert it to money or they will use, say, vehicles or other things themselves, but they might buy bulletproof vests or to buy other things.
Representative Henson, if you don't mind, Madam Chair, I think the difference is that's a constitutional officer, not an agency as established by some other government entity, and therefore could not be called into question on the use of funds or properties.
Didn't think of that. Thank you.
Representative Kidd. Watson, I'm sorry. Representative Watson.
I mean, I think we probably need some clarification on that. Most of the time when donations are done like that, they're done, you know, under contract with full knowledge up front for both sides that if there is a conflict of interest, they're doing it, you know, blindly like that. I mean, usually that's written in there.
Any other questions from members of the committee?
Can I say something? I'd be perfectly happy to do the will of the committee on that portion. However, I would object to Representative Jurgensen's amendment, adding that we all carry guns or whatever it goes into, please. So I would ask the committee not to accept that amendment. Forfeiture laws for the guns. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. At this time.
There he is. Here's the other. Okay, we're almost through. Come answer a question for us. Okay, could you address the question of the forfeiture of, funds?
Thank you. Madam Chair, since we now have the author of the bill, would you like me to turn over the chairman the rest of this, or
No,
your call?
I have to leave in just a minute, but we'll see if we can get through. On the bill, there was a question on the part, what was it? Section 1? Section 3 on page 4 of the bill. It's about the acceptance of donations, and so could you explain why that's in the bill?
One of the reasons, Madam Chair, that is in the bill, if you remember back to last year to Senate Bill 369, which was the prescription drug monitoring bill, we have applied for federal grants in order to fund that, and we did not allocate the state for any money to go toward that. We simply said that upon funds being available, and this will give us the opportunity to accept funds from the federal government for those type of programs, as well as if there are any seized properties out there by Georgia Drugs and Narcotics, that they'd be able to use those funds as well.
Okay. Representative Reinders.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since I originally went down this train of thought, Senator Carter, as I know you're well aware, we have problems all across the state with vendors who are doing business with donations and other things that could appear, perception-wise at least, as a potential conflict of interest. While I certainly understand someone and not wanting to withhold the availability of getting grants, as you mentioned, in certain cases, I do think that since it's an agency within the state, would we not need to be aware of anybody who may be making a contribution or bequesting funds or property just to avoid that appearance of a conflict of interest?
Representative, I certainly see your point, and if you would feel more comfortable with some kind of notification, is that what you're referring to?
No, I'd actually, in an interest of fairness,
sure.
If you'd have walked in 5 minutes later, I would have told you that the will of this committee would have been 18, 19, and 20 was probably going to be scratched, but out of respect to you, I'm more than happy to scratch everything except grants.
I'll accept that, sure.
At this time, I'll call on Representative Pack for any amendments.
I would suggest an amendment.
You're the only lawyer I know right here, so figure out what I just said.
Thank you. I would move to amend by striking the language in line 118, the words donations, to 119 contributions, and
strike donations, contributions, or bequest of funds properly, including funds or property from the deposition of forwarded property, and just leave in grants. Is that your amendment?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair.
We've got, and I'm sorry, we've got an amendment on the table. We got a second. All those in favor of the amendment? Representative Harden, I'm sorry.
Yeah, before we vote on the amendment, and I'm not sure of this, but I believe this is the language that appears in the Prescription Drug Monitoring Act because the state was not going to fund it, or it didn't have to fund it. We can, but this language was put in so that we could accept the grants and the donations as had been mentioned. If this is audited, I see no problem with us. I think this was put in there, in other words, to make sure that the agency had the authority to do what we gave them in the Prescription Drug Monitoring Act. And I can't say for sure whether that language is in there, but I think it is. And if it is, then we might mess up their ability to get funding for prescription drug monitoring if we take out a lot of the sources.
I would assume that our friend, the pharmacist from the Senate, obviously may have a disagreement with your point just made, or if he would have objected to the original amendment that I asked.
Well, either that
is there a
or
potential for
yeah.
not being on the same page?
There's a potential always for not being on the same page in this place.
Or else he'd have brought that. My thinking is, Representative Harden, he'd have mentioned that.
All right. If the senator's comfortable with it, I am. I just don't want us to do anything that will in any way make the prescription drug monitoring program less effective, because that is essential to control drug trafficking in the state.
All right, we have an amendment on the floor and a second. Representative Kidd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is not this similar language that's in several codes when local police departments, highway patrol, SWAT, FY, whomever, goes out and seizes property, and they hold the property for the legitimate amount of time for a court case, and then they liquidate the property. And then they take that money from the liquidated property or the forfeited property, whatever the terminology you want to use, and they reapply those funds into the departments to do other things with. Would it be frugal to leave the language like it is, but put language in there that says they have to report back to you how they use that money? So if they are doing what they're possibly doing, that they're letting us know how they're using the money and not just squandering it somewhere else to go on a vacation, whatever else with.
I can just tell you, as a Vice Chairman of Appropriations, getting some of those agencies to let us know other fund sources.
Right.
What did you say earlier about it? We may have something in it, but it doesn't prevent them from doing it?
Right. It wouldn't prevent them, but at least you'd know what they're doing with it. Mr. Harden, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent suggestion.
Ms. Betsy.
Well, I was going to say that the language up until the word property is standard language. It's all throughout the code with different agencies, different commissions, that kind of thing. The part about the forfeited property, I agree, is also in other code sections dealing with law enforcement. So this language is not unprecedented. It's fairly common in our code. Secondly, I believe that any donations that will receive are going to be subject to state auditing standards as well. So they would be tracked that way.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign.
No.
I don't know. I can't beat loudness over what I want. I'll take the chair will take a show of hands. All in favor of not letting people just give to an agency in any free-form fashion of which they. What? What? Yeah, we haven't ever written constitutional amendments that way. Pardon me? The amendment, the sponsor of the bill, let's be clear, the sponsor of the bill did not object to just grants, because that was what said I wanted to be able to do is be able to get outside grants. And he did not object to anything else being outside the bill. So we've got an amendment. We've got an amendment that says everything, you can do anything, you can apply for anything you want, get anything you want exclusively, or just 2 grants. I just butchered that, didn't I? Grants only. Representative Chanel.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification's sake, don't these people tote guns?
I have no first-hand knowledge of that, but yes, I'll defer to the chairman on that.
Okay.
Representative Harden.
Mr. Chairman, I would respectfully say that we don't want anything that's outside of what's already in state law. I think that we've been told all of this is available in state law to agencies to implement plans, and I really hate to see us do anything that might decrease the funding available for that prescription drug monitoring. That program is too important not to give it every chance. And if it's already in state law for other agencies, I see no problem with it.
Representative Henson.
I think I was pretty much going to say what Representative Harden does, but they are an enforcement agency. I don't see any problem with them getting contributions or grants. And we talk about pharmaceuticals. They're not the ones approving drugs or anything like that. They do not have the approval. You know, that comes from other departments. So, I mean, and the auditors are going to be looking at any funds coming in, so I just don't see why we don't just leave the language like it is.
All right, well, that's what we're about to find out. Any other comments from members of the committee? Representative Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The problem, I think, is that there's no restriction on how they use these donations. And being on as a prosecutor and also on the defense side, I could tell you it's very easy part of settling an investigation by extorting large amounts of money from companies. You know, unless we restrict how they use that money that's donated, I do think that there's some issues here about the corrosive nature of the government using its enforcement powers to, I'm not saying extract, but to kind of give them an incentive to make a larger donation than what's fair. I think that's the concern. So if I may perhaps amend the amendment, what if going back to leaving the regular language but adding the language in line 120, after property, remove the period and say for the prescription drug monitoring program.
Let me just make sure that and I don't want to fight too hard on this. It's not a big deal to the bill in its entirety and the importance of the bill. I can tell you that we do have a problem sometimes identifying quote unquote other funds within state agencies. As we're sitting there trying to find a way to fund education, health care, anybody that's worked in the appropriation process knows that what I just said is a true statement. And that's point number one. Point number two is we know that all across the state and local governments, that was brought up about the Sheriff's Department and other governments, there was an issue that came up with another agency that she'll go name, says, you know, it was very hard for us to take donations from Walmart. Well, then it becomes is it a conflict? And that's in the eye of the beholder. And do we want to be, and I'm not suggesting it, but it could. And that was the point of me bringing up why is this language so important to the remainder of the bill. That was my point. And I'd ask the senator, answer my points if you would. If there's a disagreement, that's fine, because I respect your intelligence.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say, obviously, I want to get the bill through. The underlying bill is very important, and extremely important, and I do want to get it through, and certainly don't want to have it held up. Would I like to see this stay in here with some kind of reference to exactly what it's to be used for? Yes, I would. I think it's usual and customary, as Legislative Council has pointed out. Keep in mind when Georgia Drugs and Narcotics goes out with their guns and busts these pill mills, that there is first of all, takes a lot of manpower. It takes Georgia Drugs and Narcotics, GBI, we're talking about a lot of expended funds from the state for this. And for us to be able to get some of that money back instead of just leaving it there for the criminals, I think it obviously behoove us. Now, having said all that, and hopefully I've made it perfectly clear that I would like to see it remain in there, as long as it doesn't kill the whole bill. But I do want to make it clear, too, that I understand that we want to have a trail for it. I understand that perfectly well.
Representative Harden? We've got a let's see if we got an amendment to the amendment. Let's see what we got there. Go ahead, Representative Pack.
So, starting 118 should read, the Georgia Drugs and Narcotics Agency is authorized to accept donations, contributions, grants, or requests of funds or property, including funds or property from disposition of forfeited property for the prescription drug monitoring program.
Exclusively?
Yes. And I do understand Representative Jurgensen graciously had pointed out that doesn't completely address the imbalanced nature of the negotiation, but I do think the protection of restricting how they use the money would be a good compromise with, if the author is willing to accept that.
Author of the bill.
Yes, sir. I'm willing to accept just about anything at this point, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Jurgensen.
Would it be appropriate to make all concerned on the review of this to maybe add with review of the legislative with the review of the appropriate legislative appropriation committee, meaning that
Well, do you mean
all of
with
these
all
funds.
excess funds going to the general fund?
Well,
But that's the issue we get into where they start hiding it, and y'all know that.
Right, that's the issue. But if
Buddy,
we're
you know
looking-
that.
Mr. Chairman, if we're looking for transparency, and we want to dedicate it to this this particular program of trying to combat this, then the appropriate oversight would be the Appropriations Committee in the legislature, because these are state funds at that point, because they've been either donated or forfeited to the state. And I think you could cure that with that small addition to Representative Pack's amendment, that it's reviewed by the appropriate Appropriations Committee in the legislature.
All right. We've got a first and a second on the amendment. You're wanting to amend the amendment with a second to the amendment of the first amendment. So if you would. Please no. Please don't ask, because I'm not sure I can answer it.
Well, I think we would have to say that the First Amendment fails, because that's still on the floor, that there was a request by hand vote. So if we can say that amendment failed and then vote on the new amendment.
Well, what we're going to do, first of all, is I'm going to get Representative Jurgensen to make sure that he gets with Representative Pack in about 30 seconds and go ahead and make sure that the language we have is one fell swoop that fits what we're talking about. And at the time, meanwhile, Representative Dempsey. I'm sorry, Representative Chokas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a question about what you just said as far as the funding. When the money is sent back, it would have to go to the general fund. Otherwise, it would require a constitutional amendment if we designate funds for a specific thing. Am I correct in that statement?
Betsy.
I don't think so. I don't believe that donations would have to go through the appropriations
Correct.
process.
But what about confiscated money or confiscated?
Reviewed, not going through the appropriations process.
But just like have them report what they've done with it?
Well,
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, I want to go back to the Mr. Chanel. Can you help me with my inexperience on this? If an agency, now the issue of regards the fees that we get with agencies all the time through the budgeting process, that particular issue and trying to identify those funds and how we decide which one of those funds are returned to the general fund, can you just give an overview? Let's suppose for the moment in this scenario, and I hate doing this, but in this scenario, let's suppose they collected a huge $10 million estate. Is that the state's or is that the agency's funds?
Again, I'm having difficulty trying to figure out what we're trying to accomplish here. I would assume that this agency already has the ability to accept grants, don't they? I mean,
As
but donations and contributions from people who have asking you that, who have guns, to me, it's just not a good public policy. Period. To the senator, maybe can't this agency accept federal grants already?
As I understand it, they wanted it codified. That was the reason it was put in here, that they've been doing it, but they wanted it put in here just to make certain that they were in compliance. And can I mention a point? When you talk about donations, the donations, keep in mind, are generally from families who have been impacted from this, who want to make a memorial donation to this program. So that's the kind of donations we're talking about. We're not talking about donations from the pill mills. I mean,
But if there's a $10 million donation from this family to the Drug and Narcotic Agency, Senator, is that the agency to do with as they will now, or does that go into the general fund? What would your interpretation of this be?
I'll have to get help. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's not subject to appropriations at all. It's not a fee. It's different from a fee or a tax that's charged by the government. So it's money coming straight to the agency, and to my knowledge, it does not have to go into the general fund.
So they could do with it as they please.
Well,
That's correct.
in accordance with their mission, sure, yeah.
But that's correct.
But I do think it's still subject to audit requirements. And if I'm misspeaking, somebody please out there tell me. But that's my understanding.
Microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think if you put the PAC amendment and the Jurgensen amendment to the amendment on it, it would narrow what it can be used for and would be subject to review by the Appropriations Committee.
It is the position of this chair that this is the second time I've brought this up. I've heard it up in other committees and other agencies where we're starting to see this big broad language that says any other money or whatever we happen to collect is ours. And I'm trying to caution members of the General Assembly to be very conscientious of that may not always be positive.
I agree.
All right, time for the old glasses again. Representative Pack.
One question to the council. Property from disposition of forfeited property, property from disposition of forfeited property, I think does raise some issues of whether or not that the money is subject to appropriation.
That might be a different issue. I'm not sure with that. And I think there's other statutes that cover that.
And the issue I have is not so much as that. Also, the anti-earmarking provision of the Constitution might be implicated if we are to designate it outside the appropriation process and the constitutional amendment process.
Well, an exception of the earmarking is gifts and grants and donations to a specific agency. But if we're talking about two different things. So if you're just speaking to the forfeited property and the sale of that, then I agree that's a different issue.
All right, listen, we've talked this, and I think everybody has a handle. I'm going to call on one other representative, Representative Randall, excuse me, trying to get a handle on Randall. Here you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. By adding Representative Jurgens' amendment to the amendment, wouldn't that cause a problem, like say if they wanted to do a community educator, that would be saying just about the agency as a whole, not specifically the drug monitoring program. Wouldn't that money be able to be used if it's a part of that agency? Wouldn't that restrict that?
Mr. Chairman, if I could comment?
Yes, sir.
I think she makes a valid point. I think that we would
restrict
probably be going just the opposite of what they're already doing.
Right.
Now, having said that, I certainly respect and agree that transparency is the key, and that regardless of whether they're doing it or whether they continue to do it, it ought to be reported to the General Assembly. We ought to know about it.
All right, the chair's going to make a ruling here. We're going to go back to the original amendment, and where we were at in that posture was a show of hands to scratch the entire thing. After that, We'll let the chips fall where they may with any additional amendments. All those in favor of scratching, let's make sure we got it right, of scratching donations, contributions, or bequests. In other words, it would read, the Georgia Drugs and Narcotics Agency is authorized to accept grants, period. All those in favor of the amendment, as I just read it, would signify by raising their hand. Please, a little higher for me, because I'm not that 1, 2, 3, 4. That was the original amendment. We've got 5. All those opposed, like sign. All right, the amendment fails. Any other amendments? Representative Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Move to amend line 118, 120. After the word property, removing the period, adding the words for the prescription drug monitoring program. Subject to the review of the Appropriations Committee in the legislature or General Assembly.
Of the subject to the Appropriations Committee, I'm sorry, did you say of the House and Senate?
General Assembly.
All right. All right. Yeah, thank you. Dr. Watson has asked the obvious question that all of us were wondering. If you could just read that one more time to us.
In line 120, eliminate the period and add the words for the prescription drug monitoring program, comma, subject to review by the appropriation committees of the General Assembly.
All right, we've got a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second? Got a discussion. Betsy, I turn to you on the discussion. Does the review problem in my mind lead me to go yearly?
Well, I feel like we need to flesh that out a little
Okay.
bit. What's the purpose of the review? Are they going to approve anything or just for their information?
Information for appropriation purposes for general appropriation.
And review purposes, Betsy, my question still stands. Should it not say yearly, much like we're doing with the Trauma Commission?
Yeah, I would say
Yearly review?
yeah, I think you probably want to put a proactive duty on the agency to submit that annually to the appropriate, are we talking about the subcommittees of the appropriations committee?
I think the appropriations chair of each one, I have enough confidence that would appoint it to the proper subcommittee if they felt that was necessary, or the committee as a whole. All right. If you can work on what you think we might be tightening that up, Ms. Betsy, and then I will turn to Representative Henson.
I would like to see the word subject taken out of that amendment. I think that makes it sound as though it's, they can own, you are, okay, fine. Because I can see where it's submitted yearly to, how the funds are appropriated or spent on a, submitted yearly or something to that effect.
Representative Harden? You wave? Okay. Representative Randall?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am still concerned that, like for instance, there are programs like, say, in the DA's office. They have programs like domestic violence centers and just additional educational components. Well, it's not funded within their budget, but they get grants, they get donations to run those, and they're part of that agency. And I'm afraid if we do that, we're going to restrict that. Now, it would be great to have some educational components out of this office, and it's not going to be funded by the state. Well, if they get a grant or some property, that would be a great thing to do with that money. Now, I'm in favor of being transparent and disclosing that you got these grants and monies or donations, and to show and be transparent what you do with them. But I think if we get really, really specific.
Representative Randall, if they disclosed us that they were using that for educational purposes and we agreed with it, there wouldn't be a problem, correct?
I understand, but being specific, saying for
it would be the wasteful use according to the Appropriations Committee that might cause an.
But the restriction, Mr. Chair, is for the prescription drug use. What if it's a program assistant? That she's not direct. It's not directly for that. It's supporting of the agency as a whole. I think the restriction may be make a little bit more. It may hurt more than we think.
Representative Jurgensen.
Well, I think we've narrowly defined this. It says that they can take and accept things for this program. So the way this would read now is that Drugs and Narcotics Agency authorized to accept donations, grants, bequests of funds, property, including property from disposition forfeiture, for the prescription monitoring program, subject to review by the legislature. It doesn't say they can't accept things for other things. It's saying they can accept it for this. We're allowing them to accept it for this.
Ms. Betsy, do you have language that,
I do, and to that point, they would still need statutory authority to accept donations for other things, though. This would limit it. Of course, and I apologize, I'm probably adding too much language, but, so.
oh, we love the lawyer in you.
All right, so, starting with Representative Pax, on line 120, at the end of, property, adding, for the purposes of operating the prescription drug monitoring program established pursuant to, I think this is Title 16 here, and the agency shall submit an annual report to the appropriate chairperson of the Appropriations Committees of the House and Senate regarding the use of funds and property received pursuant to this subsection.
Thank you for that amendment, Representative Pack. All right, we've got a motion and a second on the floor in that. Any other discussion?
Yes, I'd like to amend the amendment.
All right.
I would like to remove the words, is it for the drug monitoring program? Like to remove that and just have it subject to having them to send a report into the General Assembly, rather than tie their hands with what they're going to do with it. Because there could be other things at other times. So I think if we take out the words for a drug monitoring program, let them submit a report on a yearly basis, we've achieved what we really want.
The ruling of the chair is I would prefer to take these one amendment at a time. So the ruling of the chair is we're going to vote on Representative Pack's amendment.
Why were you allowing Representatives Jurgensen
Let's make sure.
to pass?
Thank you so much for that question. We've got an amendment on the floor on the second in regards to Representative Pack's amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Now, at this point, at this point, I will recognize Representative Henson or anyone else on further amendments. Betsy, we've got the correct amendment at this point, correct?
Well, I mean, Representative Pax's amendment just
Pass, that's correct.
although that's now been part of what's on the.
That's correct.
I think technically this amendment, the amendment to the amendment should have probably been voted on first.
We can accept that. We can now amend the bill as amended, can we not? Thank you. Any other amendments? Yes. Representative Henson.
I would like to amend the amendment by removing the words,
For the purposes of operating the prescription monitoring program established pursuant to.
and still having them have to send a report on a yearly basis to the legislature.
Okay.
But that way, we're not restricting the use of.
It's your preference that they can use it any way they want.
So-
Yes?
Yes,
Yes.
as long as they disclose it. I mean, yes,
So they
I
can spend
would,
it,
because
they can spend it any way they want as long as they disclose it.
it could be that they need new weapons. It could be that
I
they
understand.
need this or that they might, and they might have enough money for a drug monitoring program that particular year and need the funds for some other purpose. It could be educational, it could be this or that.
Salaries,
something that-
anything.
Yeah, that we're
Right.
not funding.
Right. Great. Do we have an amendment? Do we have a second? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Representative Pack.
The reason removing the restriction I think is problematic is the same problem that it raised originally before Representative Jurgensen had come up with the compromise language. In the federal system, and this is the only experience that I know because I don't deal with the state system, any forfeited funds or donations and things like that go to an independent oversight committee before giving that money to the law enforcement agents. The reason being is You don't want law enforcement agents looking favorably on, let's say, a drug company that's making large donations that could be used for salaries for officers and things like that. So I would object to the amendment removing that restriction that we just voted on.
Thank you. We have an amendment and a second on the floor. All those in favor of the Henson amendment will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
The noes clearly have it. Other amendments offered to Senate Bill 380. Just the chair rests for just a second. At this time, I recognize Representative Harden.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I'd like to ask the presenter, since he wasn't here at the time, if these amendments are satisfactory with him. Do you have a copy of amendments?
No, sir, I don't.
AM 331217.
Do we have a copy for the senator?
I've got one right here in front of me.
Okay. This should be done in 30 seconds.
Mr. Chairman, I believe this is what was originally in House Bill 1049 or 1069? 1069, this is fine.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer 3 different amendments, and all are stated on the document AM 3312-17.
Right. Thank you so much.
Do pass.
Thank you for that so much. We got a second. Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. All right. Now the chair will take a recommendation on the will of the committee in regards to this bill that's been amended.
Do pass.
As amended.
As amended.
We have a motion and a second.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. I'm sorry? No. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.